Welcome to the Programmatic Digest, a podcast dedicated to reviewing industry trends and latest news in the programmatic and ad tech world. I'm Ellen Parker, your host and Chief Programmatic Sensei of Ellen Parker Consulting, where we offer one-on-one coaching or a 6-month training and development program in programmatic media to fit you and your team's needs. So thank you for joining us. Remember to subscribe right below and enjoy the show. Welcome to the Programmatic Digest podcast, Therran. How are you doing today?
I am well. How are you doing, Ellen?
I'm doing pretty fantastic. I'm doing great. First thing first, I did pronounce your name correctly, right, Therran?
Yes, Therran. That's exactly it.
Therran. Whew! I swear I practiced this morning. I was like, he said it on LinkedIn. I have no right of not pronouncing this name correctly. I had time to practice. So cool.
I am so excited that you used that. Somebody just told me about that like a month ago, that you could do that on LinkedIn. No, maybe it was longer than that, but like, it's only been up there a few months, and I'm like, does anybody actually use this? So thank you for being someone that used it.
Yeah, I feel you, because my first language is French and the H is silent, a little bit like Spanish. So I did it too, but you'd still get the people that work with you that calls you Helene or Helena, which there's an A apparently somewhere that I didn't know about. So I think it's a great feature. But there's also like a feature where you can actually record yourself saying it. And I thought that's pretty good. So I'm going to get to that. But yeah, I'm excited to have you today. I'd love to let everyone on the podcast know who you really are, what you do. You work for Essence Global Media. And I'm really excited to have you here because I saw you a couple times walking by at Programmatic I/O Las Vegas, and I was like, almost. But I believe that all timings are perfect when they happen. So here you are. Please tell us, anyone listening to the podcast who don't know you yet, who you are, what some of your aspirations are, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of that. And yeah, this is a long overdue, but nothing's ever lost, right? So
Exactly.
happy we're making this happen. Therran Oliphant. I am the Senior Vice President of Data and Technology at Essence Global, soon to be Essence Mediacom, which is a part of the WPP Group M family of agencies and creative shops. So I focus on the data side of the ad agency space. So data strategy, advertising technology, and ad operations are the remit of my organization. We also work directly with the product teams and the data operations and business intelligence teams very closely. So that's pretty much all of the things that happen on the back end, right? All of the ways in which ads are shown, the data gets collected, the data gets analyzed and also distributed. So I got into this space really circuitously. So I think I'm semi-famously known for the fact that I was a car guy. The part that people don't know is the car business went belly up during the 2008 recession, and I had to figure out a way to transition, right? And so for me, it was a slow kind of matriculation over here. So I started with getting involved with websites for car dealers, and then teaching them how to use those websites to make more money. And that then, of course, kind of slowly turned into, this is how data is collected. This is how it's used.
Wow.
And then I ended up working at an automotive data company, which is pretty famous, called Polk Automotive, which was bought by Datalogix. And I was a part of the product team that created the Polk Datalogix auto segments, which are like widely in use today.
And using those segments.
And that's actually how I learned about advertising, really, was through like just writing about it. So I started a blog at Polk where I started just like reading about, oh man, this is like 2009, right? 2010. And so, the idea of programmatic advertising was still very new. The idea of onboarding data was very new. And so I was like on the cusp of all these things, learning about it, writing about it. I was flying back and forth to New York and San Francisco at the time. I lived in Detroit, which is my hometown. And I was just asking these people that had all these startups, like, how do you do what you do? Like literally like a kid, right? Like I don't get it. Like, whiteboard for me. And people were kind enough to do it. And I learned about, basically the mechanisms that are used to actually get ads in front of eyeballs.
Wow.
And yeah, so through a string of different roles, I ended up here today.
Okay, so I'm going to take the next 30 seconds to let you know about the reach and frequency, which is a course you has asked me for, okay? And I've spent a lot of time crafting every single lesson just for you. Why should you even consider? And then I'm already pretty aware of what's going on in programmatic advertising. I love your podcast content. This is where I'm here. Cool, great. But you may know somebody that really wants to learn about programmatic advertising and don't know where to start, right? Most likely you've received training via your current job or via a previous job, right? You work for an agency, you work for a partner or a vendor in the industry, and they provided the training, right? Is that how you got here? Well, did you know that that's actually the only way to get training nowadays? Like if for any one of our friends in the digital marketing world, it's really hard for them to really learn anything if they don't know who, where, and really what to look for. So the reach and frequency course is geared for those people. It's going to take you from 0 to 100, from fundamentals to how to run a successful programmatic media campaign, how to run a successful department if you wish to be a leader or lead a department in programmatic advertising. The reach and frequency course is for you. Okay, we talk about anything from fundamentals. We talk about anything from who are the key players in the industry. But the biggest thing is that I give you my recommendation, my feedback, my guides. I was a trader. I was a buyer for 8+ years, right? And I led teams of buyers. So I'm really, really, really good when it comes to running a programmatic advertising strategy, implementing, executing, optimizing, and reporting on, and then selling some more. So I'm really good at that. So yeah, you can probably get most of this training out there. Great. Don't only stop with my course, continue training, because that's what it's all about, right? But what you won't get anywhere else and you'll get with me is all of that experience I've been able to gather, you've been able to implement. Like this is an interactive course for you to learn anything you should know about programmatic advertising, whether you're already working in it or you're trying to work in the industry. So check out the Reach and Frequency course brought to you by me, your very own programmatic coach. I'm very grateful for this experience that I've gone through the last 2 years, and I'm here to teach you everything that I know. Check out Reach and Frequency live, reachandfrequency.live, and now back to the episode.
Oh my gosh. All right. I know we talked about we're going to focus, the theme of the podcast interview is going to be around the changing focus of user consent and the control of data and what publishers should know and how addressable ideas are the new standards, or maybe not. But something inside of me is burning to ask, like, what are the one thing okay, so you're kind of OG because of your time in the industry, right? So I always joke that 6 months to a year in programmatic advertising is almost 7 years, like dog years, right? Because you learn so much going on. So with that said, what is like one thing you remember doing that doesn't even exist now? Like part of like the digital advertising programmatic, like, because I remember there was way back when like mobile advertising was really hot, but then at the same time it was very, there's a lot of like transparency issues at that time. And I'm only talking about 2014. That's when I really started. Well, I did programmatic. So what are the one thing like, dang, I remember we had to do this, but now it's obsolete because it's automated this way.
Wow. So there's a couple of different things, actually. Okay. The first one you just said mobile. So it made me think of the fact that like there's literally no mobile DSPs anymore, right? So like back in the day, I worked for Place IQ, and
you're right.
Yeah, and my job actually at Place IQ was to work with all of the mobile DSPs and integrate our data construct into their platform
Wow.
and help them sell it and do all the things, right? And it's funny because like that literally doesn't exist anymore at all. Either they were bought up or just stopped existing for one reason or another. And now all of the I guess like hyper local contextual is just done through the regular programmatic system. But there used to be a whole subsegment of like mobile DSP. So that's one that's pretty hilarious. Another one that I think that people like take for granted now is like just the systematized way of like utilizing front end systems, right? Like there's so many things that used to have to be done purely by like their code or SQL. So like if you think about just bidding, like putting in a bid back in the day was like super complicated. You had to just like there was a kind of UIs, but they were very, very nascent and immature. And now today you just go in and you check some boxes, you put in your numbers, and it's like boom, 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 you're done. And so the whole bidding like front end is something that's also very different today.
That is so interesting. Yeah. Sometimes you don't even have to enter any bidding because the DSP suggests based on that seed audience. I know the trade desk will be like, here's a base bid to suggest because of the seed audience you've selected or whatnot, or your pixel audiences you selected. That is super interesting. And on that note, let's gear towards I think it's a good segue into like all of the changing focus when it comes to like user consent. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, Google just announced that they're pushing back to 2024 the cookie apocalypse, right? Or maybe we're already in a cookie apocalypse. I don't know. Even though this episode is not going to air maybe until let's say 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, there are a lot of point of view out there to be shared. So what are some point of view that maybe you have regarding the privacy data and what's happening, how it merged into the third-party cookie deprecation? What's your point of view, and what are other point of view that you've heard that you're like, oh, definitely agree with, blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start from the like top macro, like, right? We were always playing on a house of cards with cookies, right? So they weren't necessarily built for the purpose they ended up getting used for. And so I think ultimately it's a good thing to change the actual technology of data collection and data transference. And also too, I mean, it's a technology that is not super secure. And one of the things that I think about when people talk about this whole like area of the industry is that we don't break it down into the pieces and parts that really exist, right? So there's a part of it that's about privacy and making sure that user information is disaggregated from like what people are doing, and that you can't back into an individual's like just normal name and address and all that kind of stuff, right? So that you like keep people's data safe, more or less. But then there's this other part about security that I think is really under talked about, because like now I work with brands quite a bit, and brands have always been very reticent about utilizing their first party data in any respect, but partly because not just the privacy aspect of it, because they want to use it, they know who these people are. The issue is the security, right? So like making sure that the information doesn't leave their walls. And I think clean rooms are providing a lot of opportunity for that technology to be utilized for adding a layer of security that didn't exist before. So not only the privacy aspect, but also the security aspect. And then the other part of it is like just the technology itself. We used to do like, okay, if you think about cookie syncing and like what that actually is, it's saying, okay, somebody hosts a match table and your cookies get matched with somebody else's cookies and see if they're the same person. and then we sync those cookies together. That is also a quagmire in terms of like privacy and security, because now you've got multiple parties intertwining data that is like totally unsecure.
Yeah.
And so my perspective is it was always necessary for us to find a new route and a new method for us to like actually share data in a private but also in a secure way.
Yeah.
So so I think it's a positive thing. What I am a little bit, I think, concerned about is that we still haven't figured out exactly how we're going to collect the data, right? Do we get people to authenticate? That creates kind of crappy experience.
Yeah.
Do we find some other back-end mechanism to allow people to like automatically authenticate, you know? So there's like now these technologies that are in the marketplace that are allowing people to auto authenticate. If I've authenticated one place and you've got this code on your site, then it notices me and authenticates me, right?
Yeah.
So there's all these little things around the privacy conversation that we kind of still need to figure out like that.
Oh man, you unpacked a lot because I actually had a follow-up question about security, but you addressed it, and you're right. During the cookie, I mean, the trade desk calls it the cookie table. I mean, Basis calls it cookie mapping. Is when everybody's matching those cookies together. I did not really see how or really comprehend how that could be. Oh, now you're reusing and sharing this data, but you've only had consent one time, and you may have not been clear with that consent. So that's really interesting the way you put it into perspective, because I don't think most traders, campaign managers, but also like some of those leadership, I don't think they understand the importance that comes with that. And to go back because I have questions about authentication. Um, I'm thinking, okay, most of the data we're going to start buying from an open internet perspective is going to be authenticated, even though it's not the big data, the millions and millions of impressions, which should have never happened. Like you said, we abused cookies for that matter, and that's why we're in the situation. But what's your perspective on like the open internet and authentication and privacy and private deals or guaranteed and non-guaranteed? Where do you think we're going to fall? Because open exchange is very much, I don't know, it has a big chunk of the programmatic buy out here. But I'm saying, I'm projecting or estimating rather, that we might be moving into like that more of a direct partnership with big publishers. Think about like, a Vox Media or who's the hotel that just went media, whichever that hotel was. Um, so what's your point of view? Like, how do you think the open exchange, I mean, the open internet is going to go from here, especially with on the cookie and privacy topic?
Yeah, I mean, so that's a good question, and one that I kind of guess I have two answers for. My first answer is
Mhm.
authentication. It's absolutely going to happen. I am a proponent of this idea that publishers are going to get their act together. They're going to figure out how to make authentication a very seamless experience,
Yeah.
and that they will add value, right? Because it's a value exchange. Like if you're giving me your data, you're giving me access to your email or whatever else, like I need to give you value for that. So how do we do that? That's like the first piece of it from the authentication perspective. Um, and also allowing people to have that anonymity when they want it, right?
Mm.
Like, so every brand I'm not going to necessarily want to work with, serve me the ads that are not tailored or personalized to me. That's fine.
Okay.
So from an authentication perspective, I'm very bullish on the idea that people will authenticate if you give them a reason to do so, right?
Mhm.
Like create a relationship and give them a reason. Your question about the programmatic open ecosystem,
Mhm.
I think it changes a little bit, right? So right now, the programmatic open ecosystem runs on like what can be passed in the bit stream, right? So you've
Right.
got all this data that is collected by cookies. Oftentimes, you have
Melon Parker. What if I tell you for $75 a month, you get to join a community with other fellow programmatic ninjas, successful ones that are looking to grow, ones that are looking to share what they know and learn from others? Would you be interested? And I get to coach you through your transformation, coach you through the skill set that you need to know in order to get what you want to get. Either it's that raise, either it's that promotion, either it's even like a different job, right? So I'm not a recruiter, y'all. I'm not a recruiter. I'm one of you. I've done what you've been doing for at least 10 years, and I'm here to help you. And in the midst of things, some of my friends from the Programmatic Digest podcast, some of those guest hosts get to come. How many times have you listened to any other podcast and say, dang, I wish they could elaborate on this, or I could ask this? Well, you get a chance to do that in the community. Just for $75 a month, we meet weekly, we grow weekly, we learn weekly, we share authentically, just being ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, try the first call on me, DM me, send me information, head over to the programmaticmeetup.com. I know you'll be able to find it anyway. So see you next Friday.
Have data that's collected by maids in the mobile ecosystem, and it gets basically put into the bid stream in a string of characters or an array that I can read as I'm bidding against these, and if anything matches, I can place my bid accordingly. And what I think is going to change about that is like how that data gets into the bid stream. So it is kind of auto-populated today by cookies.
Yeah.
And it's very like click based, right? Like I'd say probably somewhere between, and this is like me pulling a number out of the air, but like, it's probably 3/4 of that information is click based information. Like, what did you do while on the internet?
Yeah.
And so like that's going to be, I think, slightly different, where it's going to be attention based metrics. There's going to be the authenticated IDs that are connected to data that's online and offline. And there's going to be just a different, there's going to be a different type of information that gets posted to the bid stream. And that will ultimately kind of define what is usable. But I think programmatic continues to thrive. It's just they're going to have to like change their pipes in the way that they're passing and collecting data, and what data it is that they have anyway, right? So like that tranche of click data that just I don't even know how useful it was. And there's times when you would say, really, the thing that drives, and this is actually a third thing. So as I'm talking, I'm thinking of stuff, but like what really drives performance is the conversion data, right?
Okay.
So like, if you can still figure out how to pipe in conversion metrics back into your bidding systems, especially if you can do it real time, that is going to be, I think, the way that the programmatic pipes continue to thrive.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good I like this perspective too, because you have to go back. I like the fact that you're taking us back, like, okay, this is there's an opportunity here, but you gotta understand the source. Like, open the hood of the car, the car reference. Like, show me the Carfax for real. What's in there? How are things being matched? I think that's really important, because again, sometimes we just go through our day to day and we don't really understand where's things coming from. We just know it's here and we use it, right? We're like, what do we say? One eye closed and the other eye open.
Yeah.
But I like that perspective, and I think this is a good segue into like one of my final questions here, which is from an agency perspective. How do you even address this conversation with some of the brands? I mean, maybe I shouldn't assume, but I'm thinking a bigger brand like a Coca-Cola, let's say, would be able to have a team to help understand. You probably have an in-house person, but like when it comes to a role of the agency and connecting those data vendors, these advertisers, the ad tech vendors, anything else, what's your point of view? Like, what's your position in how to best advise or recommend to anyone in the ecosystem, right? To a vendor or to your client, to your agency clients?
Yeah, all of them are a little bit different. And the the need states of each are different, right? So I have a colleague who likes to talk about like companies that are data rich and companies that are data poor. And I almost kind of like separate the world into those two camps. So the data rich, I am telling them, hey, we need to figure out a stack that identifies the right suite of partners that are going to allow you to use that data and take advantage of it. And not only take advantage of it, but enrich it, augment it, and like, get it out in the marketplace. You can very much replicate what you used to do with cookies if you have that kind of an ecosystem. So I'm talking about specifically like a CDP, and then connecting that CDP to the walled garden clean rooms, to an open ecosystem clean room. And if you have any publisher consortiums that want to work with that have a clean room, like an NBCU, you can do that as well, because like once you have this suite of services, then you can start to do all of the things that you want to do, right? You have the I guess the piping in place to do it. The one thing I would say that we have to be very careful about on the agency side too, though, is not recommending a suite of tools that the cost benefit ratio then goes upside down, right? Because it can be expensive from a platform and a person perspective to get all of these things in the market. So you really have to do like a prioritization exercise and figure out exactly what do you want to do, how do you want to get there, and we will then recommend the suite of tools in conjunction with your engineers on how to get there.
Gotcha.
For the data poor, it's a little bit different conversation. And a lot of times there's these companies who just never had the need to collect data. So think CPG companies, or, if I use a suite of partners to sell my services or my products, then I don't usually have a direct relationship with clients. So I have just naturally less data unless I have really good terms with those partners to get the data back. So for them, it's a very different conversation. It's like, okay, what can we do to create a targeting and attribution model for you that works without having to have those first-party relationships? So connecting you to third-party data marketplaces, making sure that we can sign deals with the places where you're pushing your advertising so that you can get that optimization and attribution. If you want to do cross-platform attribution, okay, now we probably need to figure out a distributed framework. So we need to get modelers involved to figure so just all of those things kind of like are separated just literally by how much data do you have.
That's so good. Like there's so many follow-up questions, but I want to be mindful of your time. And I usually ask this question before we actually get on the podcast. But I'm gonna switch it up. So I usually ask, what would be your explanation to like a 5-year-old, 7-year-old about programmatic advertising? But I'm gonna challenge you here a little bit, because I know that data clean rooms is like a term. I honestly started hearing about it when maybe less than a year ago, right? It existed way beyond that point, but about a year ago, heard the first time about data clean rooms. I said, okay, here goes another thing now. And then found out a little bit more during Programmatic IO, where I actually was like, oh, shucks, I might want to pay attention to this part. So in your own, so here's the question. If you had to explain to my niece, Amina, she's 5, 6, I don't know, one of them, how would you explain data clean rooms to her?
First off, you not knowing your niece's real age, your brother or sister,
okay, hold on.
your butt.
Crazy. I have to ask the oldest niece, Michaela. She's 13. I know that for a fact. She's 13. And I'll be like, this is your sister now. She's like 10. And how old is the other one? She's like, she's 5 or 6. I'm pretty sure she's still, maybe she's 6. I can't remember. Watch her mom text me tonight and be like, girl, she's 7.
Right.
You know what? I'm done.
You're going to have to post a retraction and everything.
Exactly. I'm going to have to edit this podcast, but at least I'm the fun auntie though. Like they only get to see me because we're 3 hours away. So every time I'm around, I'm like really cool auntie, so I could get back with them. The parents, on the other hand, we'll talk about them later.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, how would I explain it to your 5 or 6 or maybe 7-year-old niece? I think, first off, I would say, um, if you think of like what we do, like a game, where the goal is like to get a ball to the other side of the field,
Okay.
and you have to then get it in a certain spot, right? Like, so it's got like a box then, but there's multiple boxes. And this ball, you can write on which box it goes, but you got to pass off those instructions to other kids down the line, closer and closer to that box.
Mm.
And the instructions tell the next person who to give the ball to, and
Okay.
what they need to get, or what that person needs to be like wearing. Let's say they need what they need to be wearing.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're wearing yellow, that's like data to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that data is used to make sure the ball goes to the right place and ultimately ends up in the correct slot at the other end of it.
Oh, that's pretty good. Okay.
I was off the dome too, so
No,
I'm very proud of
that's
myself.
good. That's good. I'm gonna use this again and again. Let me tell you, I'm gonna license it. I'm gonna give you credit every time I use it. But if you're listening to this explanation and you're like, yo, actually, this is pretty dope, let Therran know. Let me know. Drop in our DMs. Drop in our Instagram or LinkedIn, whatever you want. Let us know that we did a good job, because it was actually a really tough question. It was really tough. All right. So if somebody had to stop the podcast right now, right, based on our conversation, the past conversation, what is one advice or recommendation you want to give them based on the topic? And again, we talked about privacy, we talked about user consent, we talked about, from an agency perspective. What is one thing you're like, okay, if you had to have this actionable insight, this will be it?
Yeah, my actionable insight would be learn the trade before you learn the tricks of the trade. A lot of the things that we've been talking about are builds on top of what is already a very solid infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So if you think about the internet and what it's built on, the advertising technology is all built around that. Mm-hmm. And so as it changes, understanding that base infrastructure is really important to understanding how those changes ultimately will impact the way that you can go to market with advertising, and understand all these new things like clean rooms. So hopefully you were actually at my talk about clean rooms at Programmatic IO. You don't have to answer. I
was. That's why I asked.
All right. Okay, good. But yeah, ultimately, learning these things and upskilling yourself to learn these new technologies starts with an understanding of that base infrastructure. And if you have that, there's nothing new that's going to come out that you can't ultimately figure out how to work and utilize to your advantage.
That's good. That's pretty good. It made me think about this final question for real. So I train individuals or teams in a day-to-day. That's what my consulting firm does. And very often, like, I'll get those very green individuals. Obviously, I train anyone has zero programmatic experience, how to start into programmatic programmatic media and become a trader, buyer, you name it. And I really get these questions very often. I'm always like, it depends. But based on your expertise and your seniority in the industry, what is that one skill set you come across from other individuals that are like, oh, that makes them not a great person per se, because that's a different question, but like from a professional perspective, what is that one skill set a trader that's just starting may want to develop right away?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Actually, you know what? So this is something I was like talking about with some folks on Twitter the other day. So okay. what I look for are second order thinkers, right? So I'm not looking for somebody who like knows this math or that coding language or this or that. I am looking for people who can take an idea, mentally apply it, and then understand what the effects of that are going to be. Because in this industry, a lot of stuff is a little bit opaque until you actually put it into action. And so you have to be able to play those things out mentally before you actually do it. I mean, and you're going to make some mistakes, obviously, but I'm really looking for people who have that second order thinking capability.
That's really interesting. I've never heard the term second order. So I'm going to remember that. That's pretty good. That's pretty cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for dropping by. This was absolutely a great interview. Is there any final wisdom that you want to share with the listener?
Any final wisdom that I want to share with the listener?
Although the whole damn episode was wisdom upon wisdom. But just in case you had one more for us, what would you want to tell us?
One more thing that I would want to say is like, I really hope that more people get involved in this industry, that more people of color get involved in this industry. I think it is a excellent way to make a living, and it is future proofed. So if you are, in a job or a role that is going away because of technology, here is a technology based industry that is continuing to grow and thrive, and there's new companies opening. And if you're willing to like dig in and learn, it is, the imagination is absolutely just like uncapped that you can have for things that you can do. You can create a company, you can work for a good company, and you can grow your career and live a good life. So that's the last thing I want to leave you with is like, we're looking for more intelligent people that are interested in this field, and I would love to just open it up to those who don't really know about it today.
That is such a great way to end the podcast. I mean, shameless plug, y'all. I can help with this training. Check out the Reach and Frequency.live for that matter. But thank you so much for dropping out. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, no doubt. I set them up, you knock them down. So yeah.
Thank you.